Welcome back, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Spontaneous Remarks, the only place you never know what's going to be said or done. You just got to know what we're going to be talking about tonight. And tonight, we're going to give the wheel of Nerdville a little spin and see what we're going to get. We only have a few more topics of this season, so let's see what it's going to be. All right, well, this episode we're going to be talking about, with the topic, I actually put Hulk Hogan, but we're going to include wrestling as a whole, the great world of professional wrestling. We're going to talk about Hulk Hogan, some of my favorites, the WWE, the WCW, and let's go get talking about Hulk Hogan. Let's do it. All right, guys, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to Spontaneous Remarks. I know it's been a little bit since I've done an episode, but I'll tell you what, life has gotten real busy as of late. We've had many unfortunate passings of several people in our church, family members, things like that, to where it's been very busy, unfortunately. Plus, I've been working a little extra at my job, just because I've taken on a bigger role than usual, so I'm having to put some more hours in, and plus just family time. I'm trying to work on my family some as well. So, and of course, I'm not perfect, but I try my best to do. I try to keep everything in order, but I fail in many ways. But thank you for joining us again. And today, like I said, we're going to talk about Hulk Hogan. Plus some other of my favorite wrestlers and just the wrestling world itself. So Hulk Hogan, his real name was Terry Eugene Bollea. He's one of the most iconic and well-known professional wrestlers probably that I know of all time. He gained popularity back in the 1980s and the 90s as the face of the WWF at the time, the World Wrestling Federation, not to be confused with the World Wildlife Fund. But he was known for his larger-than-life persona, the red and yellow attack, the red and yellow ring attire, catchphrase, the Hulkamania. Hulkamania, what are you going to do, brother, when Hulkamania runs wild over you? Hogan was a central figure in the wrestling industry's boom period, and his popularity extended beyond wrestling, leading to appearances in movies, TV shows, and even a brief music career. I know he played guitar, but I don't know what kind of music he was in. But anyway, if you remember, some of the movies was Suburban Commando and Tropic Thunder. No, was it Tropic Thunder? Oh, was that Ben Stiller movie? I don't remember. He was in some movie like that with a couple of other wrestlers. Hogan's impact on pop culture and professional wrestling is immense, with his matches and promos becoming legendary. He was the key figure in the wrestling industry's expansion into mainstream entertainment and helped solidify the WWF as a dominant force in sports entertainment. So now let's talk a little bit about the professional wrestling world, particularly in the late 20th century, saw many significant developments that shaped the industry as we know it today. There was a WWE, WCW, Monday Night Wars between Raw and Nitro, the NWO, the New World Order, were pivotal in all these changes, each contributing to the industry's evolution in different ways. So I'm not sure what was the very first wrestling organization. Maybe the AEW back or World Wrestling Alliance or something like that. But the WWF or WWE World Wrestling Entertainment back in the 80s and 90s was known as the World Wrestling Federation. It was founded by Vince McMahon Sr., later taken over by his son Vince McMahon Jr., and under Vince Jr.'s leadership, the company expanded nationally and became the dominant force in professional wrestling. Now, what's known as the Golden Age in the 1980s was when the WWE rose to prominence with stars like Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Macho Man, Randy Savage, and the Ultimate Warrior, among many, many others. This era was marked by the success of events like WrestleMania, which became the Super Bowl of wrestling. My good friend Derek Tulo and co-manager or boss, plus our pastor Derek Followell, and Ivy Heron Jr. Just got back this past weekend from seeing SummerSlam, which is a huge event. It was in Cleveland, Ohio, I believe. They saw many wrestlers and even got a picture of Sting, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But, man, I was just excited to see that Pastor was probably within 10, 15 feet of him and got a picture with him. So that was pretty awesome. Now, in the 1990s was called the Attitude Era. And this time frame characterized by edgier contact. It had stars like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and the Generation X, or shortened DX. This era was defined by intense rivalries, controversial storylines, and record-breaking viewership. The Attitude Era, it was a lot. Exactly what it says, attitude. Stone Cold was always beating the crap out of people, and The Rock was being The Rock, cutting those really funny promos because he always made fun of people. It was so funny. And then DX was being disrespectful to everybody with the old chop or crotch chop motion, which we'll leave at the table. The WCW World Championship Wrestling, on the other hand, this originally was a regional promotion under the Jim Crockett Promotions before being bought by Ted Turner in 1988. And Turner used his vast media resources to position WCW as a direct competitor to WWE, which brings us to Monday Night Wars. WCW's flagship show, Monday Nitro, aired head-to-head with WWE's Monday Night Raw in what became his Monday Night Wars. WCW initially gained the upper hand with the signing of major WWE stars like Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, and Ric Flair. Now, this was a point in wrestling where if they were in WWE, they would leave the promotion for whatever reason. Contracts ran out, disagreements, whatever, and then they would come to the WCW, much like someone going from Coca-Cola to Pepsi or from Pepsi to Coca-Cola, whatever. So a lot of people, if they were on WWE, you saw them on WCW, it was a big deal, and everybody kind of knew in the wrestling world. If you watched WCW, you probably watched WWE as well, or vice versa. So a lot of the names were pretty synonymous either way. It's sort of like the soda reference. You knew if they were a Coke product or a Pepsi product, you knew just by who they were, which brand they were with. You didn't really have to ask. So if somebody showed up on Monday Nitro, people would flip out because it was usually somebody from WWF or WWE at the time. The New World Order sorry about that. The New World Order was a faction characterized by their black and white colors. It was one of the most revolutionary angles in professional wrestling. It began when Scott Hall, which was formerly Razor Ramon in WWE, appeared on WCW television, which everybody knew him as Razor Ramon in WWE, followed by Kevin Nash, which was Diesel in WWE. And they had this invasion angle suggested that they were still WWE employees, though they were not. So growing up, this happened in 1996. I was 16 years old, and still kind of green to starting to watch wrestling. I mean, I watched it when I was a kid with my dad and my brother. And so I knew that it was, some of it was put on or storyline or whatever, but I didn't know how deep it went. I'm not saying wrestling's fake. I don't believe it's fake. They really do these moves. They really try to entertain people, and sometimes they get hurt bad. They get hurt worse than actors. Actors can go sit down somewhere and nurse their wounds, and somebody else can step in and do the stunt for them as a stunt double. I've seen a lot of people, Shawn Michaels, one of them, get injured and finish the match with broken ribs just because something went wrong. And there's been deaths in the ring by either accidental or just freak accidents. It is not fake one whatsoever, but it is scripted. It's staged. There are storylines. There's things that they do just to keep everything interesting. So at the time, when the WWE, the Monday Night Wars and Scott Hall and Kevin Nash showed up, it was pretty interesting to see because we had no clue what was going to go on. So the formation of the NWO being one of the most revolutionary angles in professional wrestling, the reason why it was so revolutionary was because they did something they had never done before. Hulk Hogan had always been a good guy. He was his song was, "I am a real American, fight for the rights of every man." He come out, his video was the waving an American flag. He fought Sergeant Slaughter back in the day when Sergeant Slaughter was against America, and he was always against like the Iron Sheik and a lot of those characters that at the time America had beef with different parts of the country, different countries in the world, and so he was kind of the American. He was the guy that was fighting them. Hulk Hogan had never been a bad guy. He'd never been someone you booed. When Hogan was on, you cheered for him. When Hogan was there, you were a Hulkamania or a Hulkamaniac, whatever happened, you were on his side. So the NWO storyline reached its peak when Hulk Hogan turned heel. So in wrestling, there's terms. Face means you're a good guy or a baby face, and a heel is a villain or a bad guy. At Bash at the Beach in 1996, there was a match between Sting, Sting, Macho Man, and Lex Luger, and they were all in Sting makeup, Sting face paint. And it was going to be them versus Hall, Nash, and their mystery third guy. And the third guy had not showed up. They kept talking about him, but he just didn't show up. And so Bash at the Beach, Hall and Nash were kind of in the middle of, I think they were losing, or I don't remember exactly what happened. I'll have to look up the match and see. But anyway, at one point during the match, I think they had actually whooped Sting and Macho Man and Luger, and they were kind of going, they were putting over, they were doing good. And so, Hulk Hogan comes out to the ring, and the announcers think that he's going to come in and save the day. And then he turns and does his signature leg drop onto, I think, Macho Man. Or Hulk Hogan. I mean, Lex Luger, I think, is the actual first guy that did it. That he did it to. And when that happened, my gosh, you could have seen, or should have seen the trash that was being thrown in the ring. People were throwing cups, just wads of paper. They were throwing everything in the ring because it was such a crazy turn of events. Everybody was cheering for Hulk. Everybody was shouting and screaming when he come out. And then when he did the leg drop on Luger, oh my God, they were like, oh my gosh, he's turned on him. So when that happened, the New World Order, the NWO, was formed. This turn shocked fans and revitalized Hogan's career. So with the NWO became a cultural phenomenon, not influencing just wrestling but also pop culture. The group's black and white logo, anti-establishment attitude, and frequent rule breaking made them a must-see attraction. That was when, like, I just started watching then. I don't even think I saw Bash at the Beach. I'd started watching because Hall and Nash had showed up, I think. But at the time, growing up, when you're a kid, you don't have like pay-per-view, so I couldn't see Bash at the Beach. I was just watching Monday night and just kind of hearing from what happened each week. But now the expansion, so they went on for a while. It was just Hall, Nash, and Hogan. And then they started recruiting people from WCW, like they were really taking over from WWF. They started recruiting people to be part of the NWO, and they started picking other people. X-Pac from WWF, which was known as Six, that was how he was originally known. Sean Waltman, I think his name is. He was the sixth kid. That's why his name was Six, Sixx, because he was the sixth member. The Giant, Paul White, he joined. Macho Man joined at one point. They had a pretty huge following to where every Monday night it was like, my gosh, like the whole NWO shows up and just destroys the last match and just takes over, and it got really frustrating at times. But with the NWO storyline eventually growing too large with numerous members and spin-off factions, it led to a lot of dilution. So by the early 2000s, the group was no longer as impactful, and attempts to revive it in WWE after WCW purchase was only moderately successful. But that time period from 1996 to 2000 was probably my favorite era of wrestling, because I was a 16-year-old kid, 16 to 18 years old, and I mean it was just cool. We were in school. The whole NWO thing was just fun. And when you're NWO, you're NWO for life. But anyway, the rivalry between WWE and WCW and the emergence of the NWO are often credited with bringing professional wrestling to its peak of popularity in the late 90s. The Monday Night Wars forced both companies to innovate and push creative boundaries, leading to some of the most memorable moments in wrestling history. And even after WCW's demise, the impact of these years are still felt in today's wrestling, with many of the era stars continuing to influence the business. The NWO in particular remains one of the most iconic factions in wrestling history, and is often referenced and celebrated in modern WWE programming. One thing I thought was pretty interesting was when, so there was a Monday night, WWE was always supposed to be live. They always, coming to you live from WWE or Raw's War live. And Nitro, I believe, was live. I think Nitro was live too. But there was one night where Ravishing Rick Rude appeared on both programs at the same time, which means one program was taped ahead of time. I believe it was Raw. Let me just check this out real quick. Having to look this up real quick. So Rick Rude's appearance on both Monday Night Raw and Monday Nitro on the same night is one of the most memorable and talked about moments in wrestling history. So this happened on November 17th, 1997, during the height of the Monday Night Wars. Rick Rude was a member of DX, Generation X, one of the top factions during the Attitude Era. He'd been working in WWE as a manager and enforcer of the group, which included Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Chyna. So what's known as the Montreal Screwjob. Just days before the incident, the infamous Montreal Screwjob took place at WWE Survivor Series on November 9th, 1997. Bret Hart was controversially and legitimately screwed out of the WWE Championship by Vince McMahon. Rick Rude, along with others, were upset by this real-life event, which contributed to his decision to leave WWE. Now, if you look that up, so Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Rick Rude, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and there was one more, Triple H, I guess. Well, they're real life friends. They workmates. They're workmates. They work together. So when that Montreal Screwjob happened, they were very much upset that it happened. So that's why he decided to leave. Now the pre-taped versus live show. So WWE's Monday Night Raw was pre-taped the week before it aired, while WCW Monday Nitro was broadcast live. So this allowed for the unusual situation where Rude, who had been already previously appeared on the pre-taped Raw, could also appear live on Nitro. So on November 17th, the episode of Raw, Rick Rude appeared alongside with DX. And in this pre-taped segment, he sported a full beard, as he had been doing during his time with DX. This was shown on WWE programming as if it were live. And then on the same night, Rick Rude made a shocking live appearance on WCW Nitro. He interrupted a promo by Eric Bischoff and Scott Hall expressing his displeasure with the Montreal Screwjob and taking shots at WWE. Interestingly, Rude appeared on Nitro clean shaven, which visually highlighted the fact that his appearance on Raw was pre-taped. So, Rude's appearance on both shows signaled his official defection from WWE to WCW. It was a major coup for WCW, as Rude was a well-known figure in WWE, especially a part of the popular DX faction. But Rude's comments on Nitro about the Montreal Screwjob was a rare instance of breaking kayfabe, that just means the illusion that wrestling storylines are real, which is kind of Pig Latin for like fake or something like that. But his appearance and remarks directly acknowledged real world events that fans had been buzzing about. And so the impact of this for Monday Night Wars, it's cited as one of the most surreal and impactful moments of Monday Night Wars. It highlighted the intense competition between WWE and WCW, with both companies vying for supremacy in the wrestling world. And it also emphasized how unpredictable the era was, where anything seemed possible. So, pretty interesting when it comes to that. Now let's talk about two other of my favorite wrestlers. There's many wrestlers I could name. I was never a huge fan of Hulk Hogan. I liked his promos. I liked his colors. I would root for him, but he wasn't the style of wrestler that I kind of liked. So, one of my favorite wrestlers, just because he is such a dirty player, is Ric Flair. He was known as the Nature Boy, widely regarded as one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. His career spanned over 4 decades, became synonymous with excellence in the wrestling world. Flair did, thanks to his incredible in-ring ability, charisma, and larger-than-life personality. His real name is Richard Morgan Flair, spelled F-L-I-E-H-R, and his birthday is February 25th, 1949. He debuted in professional wrestling in 1972 after training under Vern Gagne, legendary Vern Gagne, and he started his career in the AWA, the American Wrestling Association. That was the first one, and various other wrestling promotions before moving to Jim Crockett. And that later became the National Wrestling Alliance, the NWA. So that's a little bit about him. Now he was involved in a plane crash in 1975 that broke his back in 3 places, and doctors told him he would initially never wrestle again. But Flair made a remarkable recovery and returned to the ring within a year. Wow, I did not know that. So the Nature Boy persona, he adopted that early in his career, a name previously used by Buddy Rogers, and he was a wrestling legend. But Flair made the persona his own with his flamboyant robes, platinum blonde hair, and his trademark "woo" catchphrase, which I use a lot just because it's fun, which came from Jerry Lee Lewis in the song Great Balls of Fire when he goes, woo, feels good. But anyway, he became known for his over-the-top promos where he would brag about his wealth, success with women, and championship titles. His signature line, "To be the man, you got to beat the man," became one of his most famous quotes in wrestling history. We used to laugh at the line where he says, I've spent more money on spilt liquor than you have on women or whatever. He'd always used to. It was so funny. He's just a funny guy. So championships, he was a 16-time world champion, though the actual number of his title reigns might be higher depending on various accounts. He was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, and he traveled across the world defending his title in numerous territories, becoming the face of the NWA. His matches with legends like Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes, and Ricky Steamboat are considered some of the greatest in wrestling history. Now, when we talk about the NWO, there was also another great stable, is what they called, the Four Horsemen. He was in the Four Horsemen in the 80s. He teamed up, and he formed the Four Horsemen, with which was one of the most iconic factions in wrestling history, alongside of Arn Anderson, Ole Anderson, and Tully Blanchard. And the group was managed by J.J. Dillon, and it dominated the wrestling scene and set the standard for future wrestling stables. Now, there were other people in the Four Horsemen at different times, but that was the original Four Horsemen. And then in WCW, when Jim Crockett Promotions was sold to Ted Turner and became WCW, Flair continued to be a top star in WCW. And engaged in rivalries with Sting, Lex Luger, and Hulk Hogan. And he also played a key role during Monday Night Wars between WCW and WWE. Flair joined WWF in 1991. He won the Royal Rumble in 92 and claimed the WWE Championship, famously declaring, "With a tear in my eye, this is the greatest moment in my life." Flair's tenure in WWE was short but impactful. He returned to WCW in 1993. And after WCW was bought in 2001 by WWE, Flair eventually returned as just a on-screen character and wrestler. He became a mentor to younger stars, and continued to perform in high-profile matches. Now, later on, here's another great stable. They formed Evolution with Flair, Triple H, Randy Orton, and Batista, which is like a evolved Four Horsemen. Evolution. So Ric Flair's in-ring career officially ended at WrestleMania, WrestleMania 24 in 2008. He lost to Shawn Michaels in an emotional match that was considered to be one of the greatest retirement matches in wrestling history. This is probably the one where Shawn Michaels tells him, "I'm sorry and I love you," before he gave the sweet chin music and pinned him 1, 2, 3. Flair's influence on professional wrestling is immeasurable. He had style, charisma, and ability to sell a match, which made him a benchmark for what a professional wrestler should be. And he has inspired countless wrestlers, including stars like Triple H, Chris Jericho, Charlotte Flair, his daughter, who's also became a major star in the WWE as well. He's in the Hall of Fame, two-time Hall of Fame, WWE Hall of Famer, once for his individual career and once as a member of the Four Horsemen. That's pretty interesting. And he also had the old catchphrase, limousine riding, jet flying, kiss stealing, wheeling dealing, son of a gun. That's something he always said. He's just a cool character. And for some reason, he used the 2001 Space Odyssey music as his ring entrance. So on any stinking video game where Ric Flair was, they had some kind of weird rendition of it, because every time he had to use it, like he had to pay royalties for it or something. I don't know. It's weird. And then my favorite wrestler of all time, Sting. His real name is Steve Borden. For some reason, I always like, the duality of the personas. I mean, you had Superman and Clark Kent. Clark Kent was the kind of the character Kal-El. Superman was the real deal. But Superman was trying to keep his role under wraps, so he used Clark Kent. That duality is something I've always kind of maybe wished for, or kind of been jealous of. But at the same time, that's what makes me interested in well, just the nerd part of me, the superheroes. That's why I always ended up, growing up, I saw Kiss. Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park, and that was kind of the who are these guys with makeup and these costumes, and who's behind the mask, and it was kind of they were like superheroes, so they were in disguise, like who's the real identity. And then now I think that's why the whole face paint thing drives me crazy when it comes like Sting. He wore face paint, so it was always the mystery behind what does he look like under that paint. Anybody that's got anything like that, that mystery is what kind of draws me to them. When it comes to superheroes, it's the mystery behind them that makes them special. You know what I mean? So Sting started his wrestling career in 1985 as part of a tag team known as the Blade Runners, alongside Jim Hellwig, which would later become known as the Ultimate Warrior. Initially, Borden wrestled under the ring name Flash, which is interesting because guess what? I like Flash Gordon. I like Steve Borden and Gordon. That's interesting that they rhyme. Wasn't real big on Ultimate Warrior, but I enjoyed his career as well. He was just all in all the time. NWA and UWF, Sting first gained major attention in the Universal Wrestling Federation before promotion was bought by Jim Crockett Promotions, part of the National Wrestling Alliance. And then in WCW, the gimmick turned into Surfer Sting, which in the late 1980s, early 1990s, this was characterized by bright, colorful face paint, blonde, flat top hair, vibrant ring gear. So usually it was real bright colors, yellow and blue, red, white, and blue, red and white, all those things. He had such energetic, athletic style, and it was combined with his charisma, and that quickly made him a fan favorite. He had that rivalry with Ric Flair. Sting's career skyrocketed after his rivalry with Ric Flair, particularly after their match at the inaugural Clash of the Champions in 1988. This was a classic and helped Sting get established as a major star. And then in 1990, he won his first NWA Heavyweight Championship by defeating Flair at the Great American Bash. And then as WCW champion, several times throughout the 90s, Sting became one of the top stars in WCW. And he feuded with top stars like Vader, Big Van Vader, Rick Rude, and the Dangerous Alliance, solidifying his status as WCW's franchise player. Now, in 1996, this was when the NWO started. They were trying to recruit Sting to be part of them because they knew if they could get Sting on board, since he was such a big part of WCW, it would pretty much solidify their takeover. So they had a bogus Sting dress up, and he would go around attacking people and everyone in WCW, even though I could tell by being a huge follower of Sting, I could tell this was not the real Sting. But the guy fooled everybody, or, the storyline. Everybody believed him. So, Sting underwent this drastic transformation, adopting a darker, more brooding persona inspired by the character Eric Draven from the movie The Crow, which, interestingly enough, was suggested by Scott Hall. He grew his hair long, painted his face white with black streaks, and began wearing that black trench coat, carrying around a baseball bat. Now, remember the episode of Nitro where they had come out, they whooped whoever in the ring, and so they were asking Sting to come out and be a part, put on the shirt. So Sting come out. That was the first. Well, he had told WCW like a week before. He's like, I've gave my blood, sweat, and tears for this company, and you guys can stick it, because everybody pretty much had turned their back on Sting because they thought he was the doing the NWO stuff. They thought it was him. They wouldn't believe him. So he come out and he got in the ring with him, and he was talking about the bogus thing. He said, "That's your poor imitation of me." He said, "Well, you get what you pay for, huh?" And everybody kind of laughed and whatnot. And he said, well, I can tell you this. The only thing that's for sure about Sting is nothing's for sure. And then he turned around and walked off. Now, when he come out, he had white face paint on. So it definitely looked like he was about to be part of the NWO when he come out. Everybody was hugging him. They were excited. But what ended up happening was he became a lone vigilante, often appearing in the rafters above the arenas, silently watching as the NWO wreaked havoc. And this version of Sting was more mysterious and less talkative, which added to his allure. He didn't say anything for probably a year and a half. I don't remember. Starrcade 1997 was when the storyline that had culminated in one of the most highly anticipated matches in wrestling history, where Sting faced Hulk Hogan at Starrcade for the World Heavyweight Championship. And yes, this also had a controversial ending, but Bret Hart showed up, and since he was part of the Montreal Screwjob, he did not let this end in controversy. Sting ended up winning, and Bret Hart was the one that made the call. Okay, and then later Sting went on to be a central figure in WCW until the company's demise in 2001. He continued to feud with NWO members and other top stars, and he even joined, they had another faction of the NWO, which was called the Wolfpack, and it was the black and red color instead of black and white, and he joined them for a little while, which was pretty cool. So it was WCW and then WCW, NWO, Classic and NWO, Wolfpack, and they had a feud together. Sting did not choose to join WWE immediately after WCW was purchased because he had concerned about how his character would be treated. And then so they started TNA, Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, in 2003. And so he was in there helping to elevate its profile. He became a multi-time TNA World Heavyweight Champion and feuded with top stars like Kurt Angle, Jeff Jarrett, and AJ Styles. So pretty much when WCW was bought and people couldn't go to WWF because contracts or whatever, some people started this TNA, and they had another faction to work. And TNA was interesting because every other wrestling program that you had a squared circle, what they called it. It was the ring. It was a square. TNA had, for the longest time, a pentagon or a octagon. I remember it was six-sided, I think. Whatever you call it, hexagon. Six-sided ring. That was pretty interesting. And then after years of fans clamoring for it, Sting finally made his WWE debut at Survivor Series 2014, where he confronted Triple H. And this led to a match between the two at WrestleMania 31, which Sting lost, marking his first official match in WWE, which Sting should have won, stupid people. But anyway, Sting's final match in WWE was against Seth Rollins on the Night of Champions 2015, where he suffered a neck injury that led to his retirement from in-ring competition. So he was getting a power bomb onto the turnbuckle, and his neck hit the back of his neck hit the metal instead of his back, which was what should have happened. And then there was All Elite Wrestling. He returned to wrestling in 2020, debuting in AEW. Despite his previous retirement, Sting returned to in-ring action at AEW, participating in cinematic matches and later live matches, often teaming with Darby Allin, a younger star who shares similarities with Sting's persona. Sting's ability to stay relevant across different generations of promotions speaks to his enduring appeal. Even in his 60s, Sting remains an active competitor and a beloved figure in the wrestling community. One of the things, my favorite characteristics about Sting, I guess you could say, is that he is actually also a Christian. I didn't know this for a long time, but when I found out, I was very pleased to know that he was he was a good man. And I would love to meet him sometime, but Dad blasted. My pastor just got a picture of him, and I didn't, dadgummit. But that's okay. I mean, you never know what's going to happen in the world of Derek Followell, because he's always getting into something, I'll tell you. I love that guy. Well, that's it for this episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed our talk of the wrestling world, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Sting, There's tons more, guys. But growing up in the 80s, 90s, such a fun time, so much stuff to just get involved in and just be a part of. And it's just a fun time in the life of yours truly, Mark Lawson. So until then, keep riding that jet. Keep wrestling them guys. Keep going, woo, all you can. And eat your vitamins, say your prayers, be a Hulkamaniac. And when it comes to Sting, I'm not going to do his holler because it's really loud, but you can look it up and he goes, whoa, kind of like Ric Flair, but a lot louder. But anyway, hope you guys have a great night. Till next time, I'll see you on the flip-flop.